legendary electronic big beat duo Chemical Brothers are back with a new album. The last album probably wasn't much of a highlight in their career, but honestly, Further, their 2010 album, is a really good album and people need to stop underrating it. I only got onto it recently, so I've been underrating it for as long as it's been out too. But once you hear it, you'll know why it's been underrated. And I may as well go straight into this new album here, No Geography, because man, I'm just having so much fun with this. There are so many great banging tunes across this entire album that are really hard to resist. I really love the vocal sampling across this entire album, aside from maybe one or two tracks where it's a little weaker than maybe in comparison to like the greater tracks on the album, but really they're just minor issues I'd say across the whole thing, because the beats on this thing, the instrumentals, phenomenal throughout. I think the way they progress and often transcend into areas that you just weren't expecting, I think is really impressive. The rhythms across this thing are so danceable, they're so freaking groovy. I feel like they're essentially just progressing on what they were already going for on Further, but I feel like they've kind of slightly finely tuned it here to make it an even better experience. Many of the vocal samples on this thing are quite repetitive. I feel as though some people may be put off on the repetition of like phrases being repeated. I'm mad as hell, I ain't gonna take it no more. I'm mad as hell, I ain't gonna take it more, I ain't gonna take. And honestly, that example I've just used there is definitely the worst of the album, I would say, because I just think that gets a little tedious. Very similar to like what Daft Punk did on their, Homework album or Discovery. So potentially you could be completely over some of these vocals by the end of the song and you're maybe ready to skip them. The eve of destruction. But I think they're just blended in really well with the instrumentals here, and they do make for so many great tracks. The second track on this album is this DFA dance punk jam. Like, it is straight up throwing it back to the 2000s with those DFA Records bands like LCD Sound System or The Rapture. Once again, the groove on this thing is just so ridiculously irresistible that I would be very surprised if any Chemical Brothers fan would hear this and be turned off by it, because it's just them doing what they do best and it sounds so good. The title track has this ambient feel to it, which I think actually creates a pretty nice atmospheric song, even if it's probably not one of the highlights on the album. But I do feel like they're showing how how much variety they can throw into one album here, because then you go straight from that into Got to Keep On, which is this club dance anthem. Like, it is just straight up a song you would absolutely hear in a club. It has a bit of this 90s throwback touch to it as well, which I do absolutely adore. And apparently they actually are using the equipment that they were using back in the 90s on this album, but I can't really find much info on that, so if I am wrong there, do correct me, but I have heard that is true, and I think with tracks like this you can definitely tell. But even if that weren't the case and I am wrong about that, it still definitely feels like a massive throwback to that era. I mean, I think it's pretty telling that some of these tracks are equal to what they were putting out in the 90s, and it's like been what, over 20 years since their debut at this point. It's really impressive how they're keeping up the quality this late into their career. They actually do remind me quite a bit of Nine Inch Nails as well, in the sense that, you know, this 90s band, or even Nine Inch Nails were in the 80s as well, like the late 80s, but like they're still putting out material that's worth your time even today, and it's like that far into their career. I find that so impressive. I do really love a track like Gravity Drops as well, where the song has this density to it. It's so dense and packed with so much bass, and the snapping drumming as well across this thing. It is pretty fantastic. And similarly to Gotta Keep On, We've Gotta Try is the sister track to that, honestly. Another 90s-esque dance floor filler with these belting vocals as well. The freaking... It heavily reminds me of like those tracks from the 90s, such as like Unfinished Sympathy or Show Me Love or Rhythm of the Night, where like the vocalist is just so powerful and has so much energy and puts that all into the performance, and this vocal sample here just gives me off that same kind of energy as those tracks did too. It just gets you really pumped and adds this euphoria to the song that is really impressive. Again, like, It's quite repetitive, but I think it just works so well. And Catch Me Out Falling is a really solid closer as well. I really like the tune of this one, and the vocals have this like painful feel to them too, which I find really quite interesting as a closing track for an album that's so like filled with like brightness and positivity and energy. It is quite a downer for a closer. Not really a problem though. I do really like the song, and I really like this album. I'm just getting so much fun out of listening to these tracks. I think it's quite addictive, and I think it's really heavily replayable as well. You could probably treat this as B tier Chemical Brothers, honestly. Like, if you hold their 90s work so highly, you may not think this is anywhere near as impressive, but I still think, honestly, for an album, this is really, really good. B tier Chemical Brothers is above average, well above average. So yeah, I think this is another highlight for the year. I've given so many 8 out of 10s recently, man. It's been like 5 in 2 weeks, I think. Music's not slowing down at the minute. I mean, there'll probably be a period of time where it slows down because it always does every year, but at the moment I'm really happy with some of the material that's been coming out, and Chemical Brothers killed it here. Gonna go 8 out of 10, really like this album. Let me know your thoughts on this, if you like it as much as I do, if you don't really find it all that impressive, if you think it's pretty or whatever, let me know. Highly recommend this though. I wouldn't just throw it aside because you might think, it's not going to be of the level of what they once did, because maybe it isn't, but I still think for what it is, it's still pretty damn great. Thank you for watching my review, hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't subscribed, do subscribe. Have a good day. I'm mad as hell. I ain't gonna take it more. I ain't gonna take it more.